Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Brent Worth, and I serve as the President and CEO here at Easter Seals, Michigan. Welcome to our webinar tonight, and thank you all for joining us. Tonight, we'll be discussing suicide prevention and awareness. Due to the ever-increasing mental health needs that's going on, certainly since the pandemic started, has been around forever, and it's certainly top of most of our minds. We brought together some wonderful people tonight who also happen to be our community partners. Special thanks to all of our sponsors who made this free webinar possible. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, Blue Care Network, Easter Seals Michigan, Affirmations Community Center, Oakland Community Health Network, Havenbrook Hospital, Oakland Schools, the Oakland County Health Department, and the Suicide Prevention Task Force for Oakland County. Right now, the current statistic is that one person every 40 seconds has died by suicide. That's a startling statistic. And tonight we hope that through this event, we'll gain some knowledge, you'll gain some knowledge, you gain some comfort around talking about suicide. I have the privilege of introducing our moderator for tonight's event, Dr. Jeffrey Gannay. And Dr. Gannay serves as the Chief Medical Officer here at Easter Seals, Michigan, and he also serves as the Psychiatric Residency Program Director at Beaumont Behavioral Health. Welcome, Dr. Gannay.
Thank you so much, Brent. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Gannay. I am a psychiatrist and an addiction medicine physician, and it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who is very passionate and brings a message of hope about our topic. Eric Hipple is a former Detroit Lions quarterback and currently is a local national mental health advocate and speaker. And I'd like to turn it over to Eric now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gannay. I appreciate the introduction. First of all, let me state that suicide prevention is preventable, but there's several parts to it. One is being upstream on the education and awareness part of it, and then of course there's the intervention part of it as well, which means when somebody is suffering, that we're able to step in and talk and get a chance to intercede and then get them to professional help. So there's two steps to this thing and multiple facets as well. But I want to start off by saying also that I am a survivor of my own suicide attempt and also a survivor of my son's loss to suicide. And for me, a big portion of what happened in the background is the stigma that was around my family, around the culture that I grew up in. And even though I grew up in Southern California and had 2 parents and 3 siblings, there's some stuff that we just didn't talk about. And for one was my mother would be in her room and my father would say she's having one of her spells, and so don't bother mother. And that might be several days. We really didn't know what was going on, and we really just discussed it. That was kind of normal for us. Her sister was also suffering from schizophrenia and was institutionalized, but we never discussed that either. And so growing up, I didn't see part of a normal pattern. I didn't really receive my first major bout of depression, even though I had ups and downs, really until I was in college. My junior year in college, when all of a sudden I found myself stuck in bed. I couldn't get up, no motivation, lack of just concentration, and I was just stuck. And so I missed a whole quarter of school. My grades suffered and kind of bombed out, and I was ineligible to play football. So the coaches got around me and got me into summer school, got my grades back up, and I went on and finished out my junior and senior year as a starting quarterback. And then after playing 10 years with the Detroit Lions, I guess the next major bout would be about 6 years after I left the game, when I just didn't feel right. I felt lost, my identity, didn't know who I was. The same symptoms I'd had before, was just hard to get motivated. And it culminated into, I jumped out of a car that was going 75 miles an hour. Luckily, the car swerved, I didn't get run over, I didn't get hit. And I woke up in the hospital. And you say, well, how could all this happen? Well, as I woke up in the hospital, there's a psychiatrist that's sitting next to me, and he's talking to my family. And he's saying that we can do a good evaluation, and we can get him into some treatment and figure out what's going on with Eric. And this is where the stigma kicks in. That was not going to happen. Nope. that's weakness. I don't know what it was, but that's not me. The football world I grew up in, shunned that. That's weakness. You can pull through, you can do your things. And since it seemed kind of natural for me growing up anyway, that was the thing, I just not going to have any treatment. And so I didn't. The problem with that was, and this is where the education and process goes into the stigma as well, is I didn't do anything about it. I never got treatment. And it was a few years later when my son, my 15-year-old son, who was suffering from the same symptoms that I had exhibited, so you'd think you'd recognize him, but hey, this is normal, right? And it culminated in his ultimate suicide at 15 years old. When that happened, the trauma and grief and guilt, and if anybody's out there that has lost someone, my wish for you is that you're able to get past that and be able to move forward and be able to take what that loss was, but turn it into something positive and be able to help others with it. And so I will say that, through that, I eventually ended up getting help, started getting education, started understanding it, started working, started putting things together, and actually turned it into something very positive. And I was there for my daughter, my youngest daughter, who was 7 years old when my 15-year-old died. And so when she turned 15 in high school, all this stuff started happening to her. Just, the trauma kind of revisited. She started, night terrors and not being able to sleep, and her grades fell down, and she hid it really well because she's afraid to talk because of what we'd gone through with my son. But ultimately, her friends came to her and said, if you don't tell your parents what you're doing, then we're going to tell them for you. See, they weren't stigmatized. In fact, the support that she received from them made our daughter come to us. And when she told us what was going on, we got her into immediate help. We got her into therapy. She was assessed correctly. She received treatment. And then she went on and got her degree, and then got her master's. And now she's a trauma therapist and reaches out and has some clients of her own. So that's the difference between stigma. She had all the support she needed. She had, her parents were available for her, and she had, professional help. And that's all the stuff my son didn't have and that I didn't have growing up. And it wasn't because it wasn't available. It was because of stigma and because of lack of education. And so my goal is hopefully we can get past that, and we can actually have a voice and reach out and talk and understand what this mechanism is, and so we can actually help others. One thing is, that when you talk about, how can you get that? How could that happen? How can this go through life and have these events happen to you and not be aware of them? Well, one of the things is just kind of understand the suicidal mind. Suicide ideation doesn't just happen one day. It's usually built over time. And it's like when life quits working for you, the life, it's just not working for you anymore. And it could be multiple areas. It could be because of maybe a brain illness is happening, so a mental illness. It could be because maybe there's a crisis, maybe some sort of trauma, maybe a major transition has happened. And so, we've all gone through major transition here recent, but whatever it is, all some things you're stuck and just not working anymore. And when that happens to you, you can feel like a burden. And that burdensome feeling where I'm letting everybody down. I can't keep up anymore. I'm not keeping up at work or school or for my family. And I just feel like a burden to the world. And when that happens, of course, I start pulling away. I start isolating because I don't want to be a burden, but I also get to that point and I maybe don't even want to share anymore. And so I start isolating and separating myself from it. And when that disconnect happens, then if it happens long enough and it goes with hopelessness, where I feel like no hope is going to change anything, then suicide, can become an option in your mind. And so that's where the ideation starts. And so, as I said, so the intervention can be upstream, preventative. So maybe we get the help we need early. Maybe somebody does intervene for us. And so the intervention itself, where we can have professional help for someone right there on the spot with a phone call and stand by them. And so I would like to leave this opening with my idea of what mental health is. And that's a sense of well-being on who you are. And we all should have the ability to have that. And so if you're struggling, don't give up. Keep trying to work forward and try until you get to that sense of well-being, who I am. And it doesn't matter if you have a diagnosis or not. I know plenty of people that have a diagnosis. I'm one of them that can actually be, fairly mentally healthy and say I'm pretty mentally fit because I take care of myself. And I think that's our goal. So it's not about the diagnosis. Let's get rid of the stigma. Let's talk about what mental health really is and trying to get that sense of well-being on who we are and try to be mentally fit. So I want to thank you, Jeff, for the intro, and I guess take it to our panel who've got so much great information for us.
Thank you so much, Eric, for your impactful message. This really was a powerful way to lead us into our panel discussion. I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today and joining Eric Hipple on the panel. They are Amanda Luteran, who is a therapist and assist instructor at Easter Seals, Michigan. Justin Betcher, who is Development and Community Engagement Coordinator at Affirmations Community Center. Destiny Daniels, a junior board member for Easter Seals, Michigan, and attends Clarkston High School. Susan Benson, the Director of Community Programs and Special Projects at Oakland Schools. Josiah Cushman, Certified Youth Peer Support Specialist at Easter Seals, Michigan. We've already met and heard from Eric. Kat Polmere, Public Health Educator 3 and Counselor at Oakland County Health Department and Oakland County Suicide Task Force. And last but not least, Teresa Nelson, Dreams Unlimited Clubhouse Journalist and Assist Instructor at Easter Seals, Michigan. So thank you everyone on our panel for joining us. As we start this panel discussion, please feel free to use the chat feature for any questions you might have. You can ask your questions openly in the chat box, or if you're more comfortable, please feel free to use the to function to send your question directly to only Reagan Goldberg. And then if we have time at the end, we'll try to take as many questions as we can with the time we have today. Please know that we will have some questions and discussion that are sensitive in nature. That's exactly the reason some of these topics don't get the attention they deserve. And it's exactly why these topics are so important for us to talk about. It's why we're here today. Our panelists are familiar with suicide awareness and prevention. They have different backgrounds and experiences with suicide, and the stories they share are very personal to them. So let's begin. Amanda, what are some warning signs of suicide? What should you do if someone you know is showing warning signs?
Sure. So warning signs we can kind of think of as indications that an individual is experiencing distress. And this could look different for different people. You know, it could be physical signs such as sleep disturbances, maybe lack of, proper hygiene, problems with appetite. It could be through actions such as giving away possessions, maybe an increase in substance use, loss of interest that something they used to enjoy doing, they're no longer engaging in. Through words, so, individuals making statements that they feel like they're a burden, hopeless statements, feel like things will never get better, expressing difficult emotions like hopelessness, guilt, sadness, anger. And again, this could look different for different people. Some people might be very open in talking about how they're feeling. Some people might, withdraw and, kind of isolate themselves. So we can kind of think of these signs of distress as, invitations to explore with an individual what they're experiencing. So letting them know, like, I want to know what's going on. I want you to talk to me. So kind of invitations to asking them, what's going on? How are you feeling? And in doing that, you realize that this individual is in distress. It's very important to ask that question about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? And asking directly. And if they say yes, working with them on getting the appropriate help. There's a lot of resources out there, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more, but, asking that question and working with them to getting them, appropriate help.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I think a couple things that you said that really stand out to me is one, warning signs can look so different for different people. But if you know someone and notice that they're seeming different, they're acting differently, or their functioning has changed, how they're doing at school, how they're doing at work, how they're treating the relationships they have, see that as, like Amanda said, an invitation to ask them about it. Too often people, I think, are afraid to ask if someone's having thoughts of harming themselves or thoughts of killing themselves. Sometimes people think that it might plant that idea in someone's head, but actually research shows that asking the question directly actually reduces suicide risk. It does not increase it. And it's also a real opportunity for us to show someone that we care, even if they're not necessarily ready to open up to us about everything that they're thinking and feeling. I want to go to Justin. Justin, what are some risk factors specific to LGBT plus youth?
So LGBTQ plus youth face higher rates of depression, hopelessness, suicide attempts, already having attempted suicide. They face higher rates of discrimination due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. A lot of trans and non-binary youth are discouraged from using the bathroom that they want to use, that they, for the gender that they identify with. The current political climate, with a lot of states passing a lot of anti-trans bills that are explicitly going after LGBT plus youth. They also face higher rates of sexual abuse, sex trafficking, being outed by someone, generally someone that they are close with, generally on social media, sexual assault, homelessness, because there are generally a lot of youth who come from conservative backgrounds or unaccepting environments. When they do decide to come out, they are kicked out of their homes, they are turned away by their families and a lot of, their friends, their communities. They aren't, they don't feel accepted. They don't feel that they have anyone that they're able to turn to. I know personally, when I was that age and I attempted suicide, it was because I felt that I had to remain in the closet. I couldn't be myself, and a lot of youth feel that way. They feel that it is easier and better to commit suicide than it is to be out and be who they are, just because of a lot of the atmosphere, the overall atmosphere of not being accepted, of being bullied in school because they're being themselves, and that it's become an increasingly larger problem, with social media over the past decade or so becoming what it is. You see a lot of videos of youth being bullied at school because they have on a pride shirt or a pride flag, and just being outed on social media because of rumors and things like that. Rumors are circulated even faster than they were even when I was in high school in the early 2000s. And they're reaching higher masses of people, and people just don't show any sort of empathy. So these youth feel hopeless, and that they have no one that they are able to turn to. And in a lot of cases, they feel that suicide is the best option.
Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing all of that with us. And I think what I hear in there too is there's an opportunity when someone feels like they have no one, maybe we can be that someone in someone's life that provides that acceptance and that listens. I want to turn to Destiny. Destiny, what are some ways that parents can support their children with mental wellness?
Yeah, so one of the most important things is just to constantly make sure that you're letting your kid know that you're always there for them, because a lot of times they might not feel comfortable going and talking to you about their personal problems. And that ties in with making sure you're keeping that close relationship with them, because if you're having a distant relationship, it's more than likely that they're not going to come to you when they need it the most. And it's important to listen to your kids, just to understand what they're saying to you, because you grew up in a different generation than them, so it might be harder to understand what they're going through. But and it's important to stay calm when they're talking to you, because you just have to create that safe environment so that they're more likely to keep talking to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Destiny. And I'd just like to add, a lot of people on this panel are mental health professionals. We go through a lot of school and a lot of training and learn all about science and mental health. But at the core, the most important thing we do is try to listen and try to understand. And anybody can do that. And I think it's sometimes really hard when people come to you, especially when you really care about them. You want to fix everything. You just want to make it all better. And sometimes our tendency to immediately try to go to trying to fix things and provide advice and make it all better sometimes can actually make it worse or seem invalidating, even when we're really well-meaning. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is just listen and just try to understand and make that understanding our goal. I want to turn to Susan from Oakland Schools. Susan, what is the school's role in supporting our students and staff regarding their mental health?
So while schools are not in the traditional role of service provider, we've been consistently and intentionally expanding our focus on making sure staff and students have a wealth of resources available to help safeguard their mental health. Some resources address staff issues such as stress. Right now with COVID stress, masking debates, and teacher shortages, we need to make sure that our staff feel like they're supported. Other resources focus on how to get help, how to connect with other people who are able and who are ready and who are willing to help. And that goes for students as well as staff. If anyone in the school community is feeling isolated, is feeling sad or feeling overwhelmed, hopeless or bullied for certain, we want to make sure that we have them well instructed in, as Mr. Rogers would say, where to look for the helpers. And we want to make sure that everyone is fully aware of that. So the role of students is certainly to model and institutionalize positive components too. And what we want to encourage, what we want to see in our school communities: inclusion, compassion, support, a willingness to be able to feel good about asking for help is something that schools are talking about, and again, trying to institutionalize. Those core components are very different from kind of those basic educational components that we used to see, but they're incredibly important.
Thank you so much. And I think we can all aspire to be a little bit more like Mr. Rogers. So I want to turn to Josiah. Josiah, how can people help reduce stigma surrounding mental health and topics like suicide?
Well, that's a really great question. So I really feel in order to really truly answer the question, we need to know what a stigma is, which is typically, a mark of disgrace associated with something or someone. So like, in other words, it's typically something bad tied with anything. Now, to really answer your question from there are various ways that we can help reduce stigma of mental health and of suicide. I truly believe at birth, every one of us have been blessed with a great gift, and that is using our voice. It is one of the strongest tools we have in our toolbox, so we got to use it. The voices are very powerful. We can move mountains, help people, but with that also, don't let people downplay what's happening in your life. So when you're speaking up and they're like, oh, it's not that bad, or, oh, hey, look, it could be worse. That's in a way of invalidating. It's trying to change your mind about how you're feeling about something, in my opinion. And honestly, most people suffer from mental health, and many suffer from suicidal ideations. So don't be ashamed of it. I know we're born in this era that we want to be quiet about it. We want to be hush hush. Hey, don't let anybody know. Just keep it quiet. Don't suffer alone in silence, please. Speak out. What is causing these emotions? What's causing you to think this way? And normalize it by standing up for it, by saying, hey, I have a problem. I want to get it out. I need somebody to listen, somebody that can understand. Sometimes it's make sure that you find a group of people that support you, whether it's at home, at school, in the community. Want to have those people. Just please don't isolate yourself with those thoughts and some of those nasty doubts that we have. And if if someone's having just a bad day, give them a smile, give them hope. And sometimes, and a big common theme right now is listen to them. Those are one of the greatest ways that we can combat the stigma. It's just by being there and just being a light in somebody else's world.
Thank you so much. I agree. I hope anyone here who's listening, if you're going through struggles, please don't suffer in silence. Reach out to someone you can trust. Reach out to all the organizations that are represented here and others that are ready and willing to help and to listen. I want to turn back to Eric. Eric, as someone who has lost a son to suicide, what's your advice to people about how to let others know that you care and are there for them?
Well, I think that one of the biggest tools that we have is empathy. You know, the ability to, you know, feel another person by looking from eye to eye, to sensing them. I mean, we are connected in that way. And in fact, I think the thing that binds us with other human beings is that emotional content, the ability to say, hey, I know what sadness is. I've been there. And so when I see you sad, I can connect with you. And if you look at and the same thing with happiness and the same thing with, you know, with joy. And so we are connected that way. And if you look at the model, some of the things I was talking about, that burdensome feeling is making somebody, so their value, you know, they have value, and we value, you know, you as a person. So it doesn't have to be, you know, you're not a burden to us. You know, you are loved by others and by your family and by me as well, right? And so that's one way. And the other part is the isolation piece, which means that how do I connect them then? And I think the connection is we bring them into the fold, you know, and make sure and if somebody was sitting by themselves, for example, at school, at lunch, sitting by someone and talking to them, just that in itself, and just what Amanda said about just asking a question, sometimes it connects them. They say, oh, they see me. And so that connectedness, you know, can break that isolation and give hope. And I think so. It's just that in itself is one of the best tools we have is our own emotional state and understanding, you know, how to reach others.
Thank you. I want to turn to Kat, who is from the Oakland County Health Department, and ask what type of suicide prevention work does the health department provide?
Yeah, thank you so much. So the Oakland County Health Division is one of just many organizations in Oakland County that are working towards suicide prevention, some of which are here tonight. But some of the things that Oakland County does specifically is that we do provide some free suicide prevention trainings throughout the community. So like Amanda, I myself am also assist trained. That is a 2-day suicide intervention skills training. We also do Safe Talk, SOS Signs of Suicide, which is a school-based program. And then throughout the pandemic, we've been offering a virtual suicide prevention 101. And these are all completely free. We work with community organizations that are interested in offering these to their staff or to whoever they serve. We also work by providing technical assistance to any organizations that are looking for some kind of implementation of suicide prevention policies and procedures. So because we have some of that knowledge, we're able to help those other organizations implement those kind of things, those policies and procedures at their organization. And then being the health division, we're able to be a recipient of grant funds at times. So we recently, from 2014 to 2019, held a grant with Oakland Community Health Network for youth suicide prevention, as well as we just recently were awarded a grant from the state of Michigan for young adult suicide prevention. So we're really excited about that as well.
Thank you for the important work you're doing. I want to turn to Teresa. Teresa, how could asking about suicide provide relief to the individual who's struggling?
Well, having been a suicide survivor myself and having lost a brother to suicide, I know that when you ask directly using the word suicide, you are opening up a door and giving them permission to talk about something that's been taboo and stigma. And you're bringing taking that tunnel vision that they're stuck in and opening up a whole array of hope for them. You're showing great care, great concern, and it normalizes this takes away the stigma by normalizing that it's okay to talk about suicide. So I really think you can save someone's life by using the word suicide and ask directly. Do a lot of listening. use your nonverbals as well as your verbals, because 83% of our communication is nonverbal. Show you're interested and follow through with them, as you can help them in the future, hook up with resources.
Thank you so much. It is such an incredibly uncomfortable thing to do, but the reason it's uncomfortable is because we care, right? And if we can channel that care to talk about something uncomfortable, we might just save a life.
That's right.
I want to go back to Amanda. What are some risk factors and protective factors for suicide?
Sure. So I think it's important to note that anyone can be at risk of suicide, no matter, their socioeconomic status, religion, race, education level. Anyone can be at risk of suicide. But there are a few risk factors that may indicate somebody could be at higher risk of suicide. So some of these are, again, using substances, having a substance use disorder that could make people more impulsive, more likely to do things without thinking it through. Individuals who may be struggling with mental health disorders, individuals with chronic pain or physical illness. If someone has a previous suicide attempt, they may be more likely to do so again in the future. Access to lethal means. So if somebody has, a gun at home or some other lethal means in their home. Isolation, someone who doesn't have a support system and a family history of suicide, or, even just having a friend or someone they know die by suicide could increase that risk. And also, experiencing trauma that can also increase someone's risk of suicide. And then protective factors, we can kind of think of areas that can, kind of help reduce the risk of suicide. So some of these are having a support system. So people that you care about, people care about you, the ability to identify your strengths, having activities you enjoy, having just general life skills. So being able to, problem solve, coping skills, adapt to change, and, having a feeling though you have a purpose. So that self-esteem, feeling as though you're important. And again, individuals who have a support system or, have these general life skills, they could still be at risk of suicide. But if we can help individuals identify these protective factors and increase and enhance them, it could help reduce that risk and, just help with overall well-being and happiness.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's really important to be aware of not just risk factors, which get focused on a lot, but protective factors, and try to find ways to mitigate those risk factors, maximize those protective factors, and maybe be a protective factor for the people we care about. Justin, what are some ways to prevent suicide within the LGBT plus community?
So that's rather easy, accept someone for who they are, love them, listen to them. If someone is, talking to you about their struggles or coming out to you, just listen. Unless they ask for your opinion, don't give it. Don't give a lot of times when someone's bullied or something like that for, being who they are. Well, maybe if you weren't so flamboyant, things like that, like stay away from stuff like that. Just listen with your ears. And unless they ask you to say, like for your opinion or something like that, just don't say anything. Just let them talk. Just listen. A lot of youth who are kicked out of their homes don't have people to turn to. Be that person that they turn to. Be that that caring home that they don't have, if you're able to. I know there's a lot of different things, hoops to jump through with that kind of stuff, but it's really simple. It's not, we all run our own lives. We all make our own choices. We all, we're all entitled to that. It's a basic human right. Unfortunately, there are a lot of communities who don't get to live that every day. They are, there's a constant fight, a constant struggle for things like that. So it's, it's definitely a very simple, concept. I mean, on paper, at least, when you look at it, it's something that you think, like those are basic rights, like, marriage, equality, things like that, but a lot of people don't see it that way. You know, being an ally, actually putting in the work to help the community. You know, like I said, it's really simple. It's, you know, listening and, you know, being there when someone needs it, and, you know, being supportive and being a good ally.
Thank you. I'm hearing a theme throughout all of us talking about listening, understanding, empathy, acceptance. Everybody needs love. Everybody needs to be loved, right? Destiny, what can you do if you suspect a friend of yours is considering suicide? Looks like we might be having a little delay on the unmute. Let me give you, we'll give you a chance to get that working, and I'll come back to you in a second, okay? We're gonna go to Susan Benson from Oakland Schools. What are some of the programs that our schools are utilizing to address mental health and suicide prevention?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that we keep hearing too is that it's important to tell people, and we want to make sure that we can tell people who have been trained. Schools agree. So we're making sure that all staff are trained in trauma recognition, and we're training teachers certainly, but we're also training front office staff. We're training lunchroom staff and bus drivers, security staff, parapros, and administrators, and we're training students. We know that it's vital to make sure that our school social workers, our school counselors, and our school psychologists are up to date with their training, and that they're ready to accept the responsibility of responding to students in crisis, especially if those staff have had a major crisis in their own life. They can't be the only ones who have the responsibility of being the trained in any school building. So we want to broaden that as much as we can. School staffs are getting trained in youth mental health first aid, in suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention. You heard Kat talk about ASSIST and Safe Talk. Oakland Schools is part of the suicide task force, but we're also making sure that we're taking our show on the road and getting districts trained too. Staff and students often spend the majority of their day in schools. So it's imperative that schools are trained to respond and that they are fully versed on the issue of suicide.
Thank you, Susan. And for all the important work you're doing and other people in the schools are doing. And something I just want to highlight that you said, and that several of our panelists mentioned, is just trauma. Trauma can be a huge risk factor for suicide, whether it's child abuse or sexual trauma or combat or all the various things that can affect people in deep ways. And I think it's important for all of us to never underestimate the amount of pain someone else has been through. Someone's behaving strangely, weirdly, overreacting. We don't understand what's going on. There's a fair chance that they've experienced some sort of stressor, if not some horrific trauma. And then maybe we can be that one person who, instead of reacting with hostility or dismissiveness, show some care and show some empathy. I want to go back to Destiny. Destiny, have we been able to figure out get things working? All right, we'll try again in a few minutes. Josiah, based on your experience, what are some ways that people can help others cope with stressors?
So throughout, since I've been a youth peer, I've learned a few different tricks that kind of help me to help my youth learn how to handle some of these stressors. And I kind of made it like a best way I could put it is like a 5-step style to kind of help youth recognize these things and how to handle it from there. So typically what I try to help them is recognize the stressor. What is something that could in your life cause something for you to act, what's the word? Draw a blank. Pretty much something out of the normal, like, something that you're on edge a little bit more, or you're a little bit more snippy, or you're exhausted. Typically, during this time, we develop bad coping mechanisms. Because a lot of people, like I said, during the big stigma is a lot of us don't get help. And a lot of us like, oh, I got this, I can handle it. And we learn all the wrong ways. So it's one, like I said, recognizes that stressor. Triggers, I know Danielle Workman just asked me about triggers. What I mean by that is like, say, for example, one of my big ones is finances. I hear about finances, my blood begins to boil, I start getting stressed, and I start thinking logically, and I start getting aggravated, trying to balance a million different things to make sure that I can make it to the next day or the next week. So I could use that as the quick example. The next one is being self-aware of those things. So for me, knowing that, oh, hey, if I get on the subject, I'm going to get a little aggravated. I'll be a little snippy towards my fiance. She might call me a swear word, or, we're just kind of go butt heads for a second. And it's recognizing, oh, hey, I'm starting to become irrational. I'm starting to become more, a little bit more mean or short-tempered. And right there, a lot of us have different coping mechanisms that help there. And that's the third step. Typically, it's recognizing and how to manage to help relieve that stress. I sadly went a really bad way to handle this. I went to alcohol. I used to drink heavily. The life just got super stressful. I didn't want to deal with anybody, didn't want to deal with anything. So instead, I would go off, hey, I'll have a few drinks, calm my nerves a little bit, and handle it from there. And it ended up coming where I actually almost lost my engagement because of it. It ruined a lot of my aspects of my life and kind of made me realize what's going on. The next one would be step 4 is flipping the script, taking that bad behavior or that bad coping mechanism and turning it into something better. It takes 21 days to start a new habit. So instead of drinking, I started exercising. I started doing full contact medieval combat. I started getting out and about, walking, getting fresh air, changing what I was doing to allow me to handle these problems differently. And that helps a lot. And then usually the 5th mechanism is if you already have that bad behavior, it's recognize that it's bad. Everything can be bad to a certain extent. Hey, I'm gonna go watch TV for a bit. Next thing you know, 3 hours gone by and got nothing done. Sometimes it's I'm gonna sleep in, give me an extra 2 hours, and then it's constant. So let's make sure that those unhealthy mechanisms are not going off like a madman. Yeah, those are my 5 ways.
Thanks, Josiah. You had me at full contact medieval combat. Now I got to know what that's about now.
So there's something I got into, I want to say about, I'm 24, about 10 years ago. A bunch of my friends and I, when we were kids, got involved with this thing called Dagger here. And we get out there, we'll grab our padded gear and just whack the heck out of each other. So yes, there's a bunch of grown mid-20s, early 30-year-olds running around looking like they're from the medieval time era, like the Ren Fest right in your backyard. And just yucking it up, having a good time, beating each other up.
So, I think one thing I'd just like to add is just coping skills. Kind of the way I think about coping skills is that we all kind of have our own list of coping skills. And it may be conscious or semi-conscious or totally unconscious, but they're things we go to when we're stressed. And when number 1 doesn't work, we go to number 2. When that doesn't work, we go to number 3. And somewhere on all of our lists are unhealthy things like alcohol, drugs, suicide. And it might be, one of those things might be number 3 on my list. It might be number 1,000 on on your list. But at some point we might exhaust all our resources, all our coping skills, all the healthy coping skills, and make it down there. And we all have our breaking point. We all have our threshold. And so a lot of times, what the ways that you can help yourself or that mental health professionals try to help is by adding healthy coping skills on the list to push those unhealthy coping skills down the list, whether it's exercise or spending time with loved ones or reading or coloring or medieval combat, whatever it is, to push those things down the list. And unfortunately during COVID, sometimes it's been extra difficult because some of those healthy coping skills are limited or restricted to us. It's not as easy to go play sports, to go out with friends, to go to church or synagogue or mosque or whatever helps you, gives you meaning and purpose and helps you cope. So it's even more important that we have these conversations and try to find whatever the right coping skill is for us and find more and more of those and put those on our list. It looks like we have Destiny back. And so Destiny, what can you do if you suspect a friend of yours is considering suicide?
Yeah, so the first thing that you should do is just tell a trusted adult or anyone for that matter. A lot of people may think that you can handle it by yourself, but it's such a big issue that no one can handle it by themselves. So yeah, it's important to tell other people, not keep it to yourself, even if that means even if they told you to keep it to yourself, just do not listen to that. Also, to just like what Justin was saying earlier, to listen to them. Most of the times they aren't looking for your opinion or an answer to what they're going through. They just really need you to listen. That's the biggest thing you could do for them. And just remind them that you're always there for them. And because when they're going through those times, they might be forgetting that there are those people that care about them and love them.
I'm a psychiatrist, and if someone tells me they're having thoughts of suicide, I go to a trusted adult too. I will go and get help and get consultation, figure out how best to help that person. And so whether you're a kid or an adult, if someone tells you don't tell anybody, not telling anyone might make things worse. And we want to make sure we do everything we can to help somebody and save their life. And I think the fact that people say don't tell anyone speaks to how difficult this is. So if you turn out to be that trusted adult that someone goes to, make sure you realize what a big deal it is that someone's coming to you, and live up to that moniker, trusted adult, and do the things that Destiny and everyone else has been talking about. Make sure you listen, make sure you try to understand and help them get through whatever the struggle is that they're going through. Speaking of trusted adults, I'm going to turn to Eric. What has helped you most through the grieving process to gain better mental wellness?
Well, I'm like Josiah. I went through ups and downs. Self-medication was one of my early tools, and it resurfaces every once in a while when things get really tough, unfortunately. But it's trying to manage those things. And so I think dealing with someone that's going through, we're talking about going through loss, correct? Somebody who's afterwards. I got caught up because I was thinking about something else as well. Sorry. And well, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I'm going to answer that question, but I want to get to this because it came up and it's very important. After my son's death, the call to action to me was to do something about it. And so I went and got trained in Yellow Ribbon at the time, which was suicide prevention. Then QPR, which is question, persuade, refer, which is another model. And then ended up getting assist trained as well. And that training is so important because it gives you the tools on how to talk to somebody. One of the reasons why somebody doesn't ask that question that can free somebody and feel like they're connected and also open up that window. The reason why people don't ask that question is because of the fear of the answer. And the reason why they have the fear of that answer is because they don't know what to do. And they don't know the resources. And so they ask the question and they won't even use suicide, but they might ask questions like this: you're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? They say it in a way to push back, to say, I don't want to hear that answer. If it is, I want to hear an answer say, yeah, you're okay, because I'm not equipped to handle that. And so I would suggest to everyone, to go on and make it a part of your life, to go ahead and get trained in that, just for that reason, so you have that in case it ever comes up again. But be able to talk to somebody. As far as when he's lost somebody, the grief and the part that goes with it is to grieve properly. One of the problems that we have, I think, when we talk about suicide, this has to do with the stigma that goes along with it. But and I can even think of it at a funeral, for example, where it should be the safest place in the world to talk about what happened. And yet, you know, at the suicide deaths, when you at the funerals, you have people that come up and they'll say, "I'm sorry," that kind of pat and kind of back off. They don't know what to say, and so they don't engage. And so that means the person who's there, who's grieving, and all of a sudden feels like this is the most safest place in the world to be able to talk about this, doesn't talk about it. You know, because they're saying, well, if they don't want to know, then maybe I shouldn't be talking about it. And they close down, and that close down means you're shoving down, you know, your emotions. You're trying to bury them. You're trying not to, you know, feel them. You're trying not to be it. And quite frankly, that does lead to really maladaptive stuff like substance use and stuff, and, you know, and acting out and stuff, and trying to bury and isolate and stuff, and become risky yourself. And so I would say go out and get trained, learn what the resources are, be a voice. You know, so so we can help educate others and utilize that, and that's a great way to honor, you know, somebody that you've lost, is to make their life worth, you know, that they've saved others, you know, through their loss. And so I would say that.
Thank you so much. I think that's great advice. I think that's exactly why we're doing this talk, to raise awareness about this, to provide some education. And remember, when you don't know what to do, listen. We can always do that. All of us can do that. Kat, what is the Suicide Prevention Task Force, and what is their purpose?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So one of the most important things that Oakland County Health Division does is convene and facilitate the Oakland County Suicide Prevention Task Force. And that was started in 2011. And originally had a youth focus, though in 2019 we voted to expand it to a focus on all age groups, just because we noticed the trends in Oakland County. And we noticed that it was important for us to also include those other age groups in our task force. So what is the task force? It is just a group that meets regularly, and that all these people have a vested interest in suicide prevention in the county. And these people come from various sectors. They could be coming from schools, healthcare, law enforcement, mental health, community organizations. We even have some community members and people who are either suicide attempt survivors or suicide loss survivors. And what we do is we have a strategic plan. We really work to raise awareness about the issues of suicide and mental health in Oakland County, and make people let people know what resources that we have available, because we really are lucky in Oakland County to have a lot of resources. And we just do some general education around suicide prevention. We hold events. We will sometimes have billboards, bus ads, things like that. And one of the things I want to mention, because you might notice here today, is that one of the things we like to raise awareness about is stigma and the way that language impacts stigma. So we like to talk about how much language matters when it comes to talking about suicide and mental health. So those folks, you folks here might notice the way that all of us panelists are talking about suicide and mental health. So we really want to use language that is fairly neutral, not stigmatizing, kind of trauma informed. So instead of saying what we used to say in the past, like committed suicide or completed suicide, we want to use the language died by suicide. Again, that's pretty neutral and destigmatizing compared to committed or completed, which we kind of assign value to. Same with, we might have seen this in the media from time to time. People write successful suicide or unsuccessful suicide attempt. Again, that's kind of assigning a value to it when we want to use neutral, destigmatizing language. So if there's a suicide attempt, we just want to say suicide attempt, or they survived a suicide attempt, as opposed to successful, unsuccessful, complete, incomplete. And just pay attention to the language that we use. I know none of us are perfect, and sometimes we might slip up right? There's no language police. We're not going to come after you, but it's just good for us to be mindful of, hey, is the way that I'm speaking about suicide and mental health, is that contributing to the conversation? Is that giving the signal to others that I'm willing to talk about this and I'm not going to judge them?
I think that was really well said. I think it answers one of the questions that was asked in chat. And I think it also speaks to what Eric said about, how you frame things changes how effective it is. When you ask directly, are you thinking of suicide versus you're not going to kill yourself, are you? That changes the whole connotation, it changes the whole conversation, it changes the emotions, changes the reaction. We have to talk in a way that invites people to be open and honest, that gives them permission to talk about difficult things.
Dr. Ganay, we have another question in the chat.
Sure.
This one is for Justin. Justin, what resources do you recommend for young adults who would normally have had their social needs met at college, but are now feeling isolated?
A lot of universities have pride groups. They have groups that specifically focus on the LGBT+ community. Depending on where the schools are, there are a lot of organizations like Affirmations. Affirmations is probably one of the largest in our area, but I do know that there are some on like the western side of the state near Kalamazoo. There's one in Bay City. There's some, quite a few upstate. If they're at a university that is kind of in an area that doesn't have that, look at a lot of these organizations like our organization. One of the benefits of the pandemic was we took all of our programming virtual. So, and a lot of our programming, even now that we are reopened, our facility is reopened, is still virtual. And I know that's not giving that person-to-person contact that a lot of people are still, kind of craving and want. It is, it's still helping build a sense of community, which, will eventually, because I work with our youth, and a lot of the youth want that in-person contact, but we supplement that as best we can with like a Discord server and things like that. So there are a lot of options that route too, with a lot of, organizations where a lot of things are still in a virtual space where they are accessible to a lot of people. And some, some people almost prefer it that way. That way they can kind of put their feet in the water a little bit and then decide, if they do have, an option to go something in person, that they're able to. But a lot of universities do have, like I said, pride groups. So those are good places to start. But I feel free to share my email, and I can, our executive director has contacts across the country. He came back from LA. So there are a lot of other resources. What I mentioned was kind of just a little taste of what, we're able to kind of find to fit each individual.
Thank you, Justin. In a moment, we're going to put some resources on the screen, and I wanted to ask Teresa, in addition to linking to appropriate resources, how can you show support and respect to an individual who's feeling suicidal?
Well, I think there's two things. We talked a little bit before about asking directly, which gives them permission to finally open up and be free to talk. And I think the other thing that we mentioned just once was to hear their story. Ask them what happened to them that brought them to this point. Not what did they do, but what happened to them without judgment. And ask them about what kind of pain they are in, emotionally, physically, whatever. Because the word pain and the word suicide are two things that they can connect strongly with. And when you connect with them, that's making them feel less isolated, less rejection, less judged. And all those things are healing and give hope to them. So I really like that. And then the other thing that we can do is we can set a safety plan with them. So we know some of the resources maybe that would work for them, but we actually take the time to make the calls with them, to let them be alone between now and the time that they have the help, see if they can be with a family member or a friend, whatever. and make sure that we have for the next 24 to 48 hours things covered for safety. So that shows respect and care. And I think asking directly, asking about their pain and showing great care, that's where, and listening is really where it's at. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So thank you all for sharing your insights with us, and it's such a great discussion that we had. We'd really like to share some of the local and community resources with you, and this will actually be sent to each of you post-webinar, so no worries about writing down this info. But one thing I would like to highlight on this list is calling 911 for someone who's in a mental health crisis. A lot of times people don't necessarily think about 911 as a resource when it comes to mental health. They think about it when someone's, you know, maybe when there's a crime been committed, or when someone's having a heart attack. But emergency medical services are trained and available to help people with mental health crises as well, and do assessments to see if someone is thinking about harming themselves, or if they have tried to harm themselves. And taking them to the emergency room may result in them going to the hospital for mental health reasons, or sometimes getting connected to mental health resources that are out in the community. And so please keep this in mind as an important resource when you're struggling, or when someone else is struggling, and maybe you don't know what else to do. It could save a life. We also have resources for parents and for LGBT plus youth on here. Our next slide is our webinar partners. Please use these partners as resources for you in the community, as we're all here to serve. This slide shares trainings in the community from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan for our school leadership, to various trainings and toolkits that are available to you and your families. And I just really want to thank everyone who was able to attend today. And I know I found this to be a really important conversation. I learned a lot from hearing from all of our panelists and their personal and professional experiences. And I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope you learned something. I'm going to turn it over to Brent.
So if you like this format, this webinar style format, and want to learn more about suicide prevention, you can join the Oakland County Suicide Prevention Task Force for their webinar on September 30th. And this will include a variety of mental health providers and partners, and the topic is suicide prevention in a virtual world. So huge thanks, you know, Jeff acknowledged everybody, but I want to give huge thanks and kudos to our partners, and especially our panelists again. Thanks for spending your time with us. Thanks for giving every time. Early on when I opened up, I just shared a statistic, and really, so you think about the start of this webinar to the end of it, and we have lost 90 lives to the serious public health crisis. So certainly in my opinion, if we're able to help one person tonight get the help that they need, then we were a complete success. So when we introduced Eric Hipple, there was a quote that he had shared with us, and it was, "Human connection is the light that defeats the darkness of isolation, and hope is its brightness." So that human connection is so important to everybody. And a lot of people mentioned that tonight. It wasn't just Eric, but it was multiple people that talked about that. And so thank you for your human connection with us all tonight, and giving us your time again. We'll email out this webinar for all of you all. It'll include all the resources that we mentioned. And if you need any other assistance, please reach out to us. Good night, and thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you.